All of these leadership skills you're going to notice really are going to transcend technology. These are skills that were needed 50 years ago to be a great leader, and they're skills that are still needed today to be a good leader, regardless of what technology tools we're using in our business. We have to get good at this. On the core value side of things, like, do you really live them inside of your organization? Do you train all of your new employees, not just what they are, but how they would demonstrate that they're living those core values on the day-to-day basis, right? Like, one of our core values is being open and vulnerable. Another of our core values is showing respect for everyone. How do you live those core values internally in your business, and training people on that stuff, right? We often bring somebody in and they're the head of marketing. So we train them on the marketing software and we train them on our systems, but we don't train them on the why we exist as a company, right? We often don't get in and train them on things like the BHAG and how we live our BHAG inside of our organization. So my BHAG is to replace vision statements with vivid visions worldwide, right? I really want companies to recognize that they're missing a huge part in their organization if they only have a vision statement or a mission statement. Really, nobody knows what you're building and why you're building it. So really making sure that everyone understands your vision and your BHAG and your core values and your core purpose, and making sure that you train that kind of stuff. I also really like training the employees on kind of the history of the company and how we got here. What was their crazy scheme for quitting their jobs and starting this business off? And how did they have to kind of pivot a couple times in the early days to become what they are today? And where did they screw up along the way? And what were their lessons from the edge? And all those funny stories that we know at the team, and some of the early original gangsters knew with our companies, but we don't necessarily know today. But that's the core and the culture of your organization that you really want to train people on. So it's great to be able to sit down and document those stories, and then have your founders or have some of your early leadership team members tell those stories on video, so they can become part of your training program ongoing, going forward for all employees. And those are all parts of your training program that you want to think about in your company, is how do you indoctrinate people? One of the people that heard about my concept of not just the BHAG, because it wasn't my concept, that was Jim Collins, but I talked about really indoctrinating people into your BHAG. They took their BHAG and made an entire office wall out of it, and not only explain what the BHAG was, but also how they were going to actually roll it out internally. Once you have your why really solidified and you're training people on your why, you're training them on your core values, your core purpose, your vivid vision, the history of how you got there, then we can train people on the how. And again, most companies skip over and really miss on training people on the how. And what I mean by the how is how we do our jobs, how we act as leaders, and do we spend time growing people on that? So I'll give you an example of some critical leadership skills that I believe we have to grow all of our employees with inside of our companies. And I think that our job as leaders is to grow people. If you think about all of our employees today, it's almost like they're all climbing up two ladders, right? They have one foot is climbing up the skills ladder, and the other foot is climbing up the confidence ladder. And our job is to get them going up each ladder. This is one of the reasons why you're all in the COO Alliance, is it does two things for you. First is it continues to give you more and more skills to excel in your job, so that you can come back into the organization as a better leader. And it shows you that you're not a imposter. You're not trying to figure this out as you go as much as you think you are. It gives you the confidence that you're actually much stronger than you probably thought even coming in. Here are some of the core skills that I think we need to grow inside of our organization. The first one, and it's the one that I believe is the most powerful of all, is called situational leadership. But situational leadership is understanding how to adapt our leadership styles on a situation by situation basis for the employees that work with us in our organization, or for groups that report to us, so that we situationally adapt. This is the number one skill that is used and trained consistently at Starbucks at the head office level. They had 42 people at the C level and senior VP level, and every quarter they got more training in the area of situational leadership. It was the number one core skill that at Starbucks leadership team level, they continually trained people and reinforced them on, with situational leadership. The next area that I think is really right up there in terms of the top few as well is coaching. All of us as leaders have to coach people. We have to coach them on getting better at a skill, or growing their confidence, or working better and collaborating. There's all the different areas of the business that we're constantly coaching people on. Our role, again, in terms of growing people, is really acting as a coach. And so there's some skill sets around that if we can get better as a coach and if we can train people to get better as a coach, that will excel in our roles as well. The next area is training. And that's actually running classroom training sessions. Very different from coaching. A classroom training session is when you're developing a model, you're making sure that you have the leader's notes ready, you have the follow-up, you've got the pre-tests ready, how to facilitate a group, how to get people learning using the different learning styles of visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. You think through the handouts, etc. And there's some skills related to training that we all need to get better at in our organizations as well. And by the way, all of these leadership skills you're going to notice really are going to transcend technology, right? These are skills that were needed 50 years ago to be a great leader, and they're skills that are still needed today to be a good leader, regardless of what technology tools we're using in our business. We have to get good at this. Part of training can be taking all the content that we're developing and pulling it into a training platform like a Thinkific or a Kajabi, et cetera. The platform is no good if you don't understand how to pull that content in and then how to deliver that content. Delegation is another key skill. Delegating to people, we think it's so simple. Hey, just do this. But there's an art to delegating so that you empower people. There's an art to delegating so that people get stuff done faster. There's an art to delegating so that people get stuff done on budget. And there's an art to delegating so that the output that's being done, the result of what you're delegating, comes back to you the way that you want it to look and feel at the end. Much like delegating a creative brief to an ad agency so they know what kind of advertisement to build, so that when they come back to you, it looks and feels similar to what you were thinking in your mind. So there's a real art and skill to delegation that we can all learn as leaders. Another one is related to meetings, right? How to run meetings, how to facilitate meetings, how to involve people in meetings, how to run meetings via Zoom, right? A meeting is anytime you have 2 or more people over video or in person, and there's an art to running those meetings and then which different meetings you need to have inside of an organization. The reason that most employees complain that meetings suck is they've never been trained on how to run meetings, nor have they been trained on how to attend them and participate in meetings. The next skill is interviewing. You think Miranda was saying that they're going to go from about 180 employees up to 250 employees and probably double again next year. Their management team had better be very, very good at interviewing and recruiting and selecting people, right? If they leave it all up to an HR team, they'll fail. But if they make sure that their mid and senior level team is all really trained and skilled in interviewing and certified in interviewing, then they know they can go to that next scale of the organization. But most leaders have never had more than maybe a half hour of training on interviewing, if that. And it's so core because you're always bringing new people into the organization. So interviewing is a key skill that people need to be really strong at. Another one is email management. Think about this for a second. All of us probably spend about an hour a day or hour and a half a day just managing our email. But have we ever been trained on email management? Or did we just figure it out on our own, right? But there's actually systems out there to make sure that you can actually be effective with email, that you can always have an inbox that's at 0, that you can communicate and collaborate collectively. And it's a tool, but we need to understand how to use that tool. Right? So there's another tool or another system that people need to be good at. Another area is time management, right? We often take for granted why we might be good at getting some stuff done. Maybe we have some innate skills, but imagine if we all learned the skills involved in time management. We all were taught a couple of different systems for time management that we could adapt or iterate to make our own. And imagine if we trained all of our managers and all of our leaders on time management, and how much more effective they would actually be. Because at the end of the day, we're not going to get more time. We just have to manage the time that we have more effectively. And there's skills related to that we can all be trained in. The other one is hiring. Interviewing is one side of the equation, but then there's the hiring and onboarding and really training people to make sure that they're good at that. There's an art to making the offer. There's an art to negotiating salary. There's an art to starting somebody up and making sure that they're trained and onboarded and feel loved. And again, those are things that need to be systemized and trained. And you don't want to take for granted that executives know how to do this stuff. There's an art and a science to problem solving. Do you actually teach people how to solve problems, how to solve complex problems, how to solve problems that might be intertwined with other business areas or business leaders who have to be involved in the problems? Or maybe there's problems that overlap each other and you need to actually teach people how to unwind those. Again, there's skills and methodologies that exist for problem solving that when you train people in those, it helps take them to the next level. Conflict management, right, is another art. And what causes conflicts inside of a company? Written communication in Slack and messaging and email is the number one cause of conflict inside of an organization. Verbal communication is another sign of conflict inside of an organization. And training people how to handle conflict, how to diffuse conflict, how to discuss conflict that's happened and work through it is much better than just assuming, again, that, well, we're leaders or we're business people, we must know. There's also skills that you can learn and can be taught that are going to help people with that. Next area is one-on-one meetings, right? Coaching your employees, coaching and growing your employees. And there's an art and a skill or a science to running one-on-ones. And again, don't just assume that because a leader has direct reports that they know how to run one-on-one meetings and how to get the best results through people with coaching and alignment and removing obstacles. Those would be, as I think of it, as the kind of the core leadership skills that you need to have all of your teams getting better at inside of your organizations. And the last is project planning, right? If you take a goal that you have and then you have multiple projects that you're going to need to do to get that goal to happen on time, how do you actually teach people to manage projects so that you can get more done with less people faster, right? And I think a lot of people end up having project creep and things taking longer, partially because they don't know how to run projects, partially because they don't know how to coach people, partially because they don't know how to actually train people or run meetings related to the projects. There's lots of overlapping skills that need to happen so that you get done. These are all skills that I got trained at back when we were running College Pro Painters. Not only was I trained in these, but I trained multiple training sessions on each of these areas. And then they had certification models in place to certify leaders could actually role model and be proficient at using these skills as well. So when it comes to learning, when it comes to teaching people, remember that people learn 3 different ways, right? We learn as visual learners, auditory learners, and kinesthetic learners. So visual learners learn from watching others. They learn from watching videos. They learn from looking at pictures. And the visual style is important to bring in for those types of learners, but also for every learner, right? Some aspect of visual learning is going to help supercharge the individual's growth. And a person who only learns visual is going to learn best from visual, but they will learn from some auditory and some kinesthetic. And then auditory is you're learning from listening. Maybe it's from an audio book. Maybe it's from listening to someone describe the process. And the kinesthetic is learning by doing, right? Where you're actually hands-on. And then I also think of the stages of learning that people go through. So the stages that they go through start on the bottom left with abstract conceptualization. That's when people are learning the concept, right? So let's say that later today, we're going to be talking about the concept of situational leadership. We're really going to be very squarely focused on the abstract conceptualization. When you go back and start practicing it, or when you role play, or when we break up into groups and you practice using that skill, that's the active experimentation. That's why when you're at a training session, they often will role play or you'll practice with somebody else. They're trying to activate this stage of practicing and using the skill. And then you move over to the concrete experience. That's where you're learning from doing. You're actually out in the field or you're in the office and you're actually using the skill and you're learning from doing it. And then the last stage is kind of the debrief or the reflective observation. That's what did you learn when you were doing it? So it's listening to your own sales calls. It's listening to someone else's sales calls. It's writing notes of what did I do well? What can I do better? And then you kind of move back over again to the abstract conceptualization. So you're constantly in this cycle of learning as a leader, and your people that report to you are always at these stages of learning as well. But we often get stuck in that concrete experience and we don't talk to them about what they've learned. We don't move them over to the reflective observation, or we don't keep trying to grow them and bring them back to the abstract conceptualization. So I always like to keep bringing people back to the abstract conceptualization, which then lets them go and practice it and try it. And then we talk about it in our coaching and we give them more ideas. You're constantly growing through this learning cycle or learning stages. So if I think about a basic training model over the course of a quarter, right? Like this is kind of like a good basic model. Let's say that we wanted to get our employees to be better at meetings, right? So here's a way that you could get everybody to be much, much better at meetings. Let's say that in fourth quarter, right, October, November, and December, you want everybody in your company to be really good at meetings. What I would suggest you do is month one, buy every single employee a copy of Meeting Suck. Buy them the hard copy. It's only a $15 book. It's a great investment when you think that you pay them $60,000 a year and they spend an hour a day in meetings. Invest $15 so that they can read the darn book to understand how to run meetings, how to participate in meetings, how to show up at meetings, how to get the most out of meetings. You're going to get a huge kind of growth from them. So month one, have them read the book Meetings Suck. And then in the last week of month one, have the employees come together and do a 5-minute book report on what they learned in the book Meetings Suck, what they liked from the book Meetings Suck, what they think they can put in place from the book Meetings Suck. And you're going to actually be able to, they've gone from the abstract conceptualization, now they're kind of buying in. In the second month of the quarter, so let's say in November, you're going to have all of your employees watch a video on meetings. So just go on YouTube, find 1 or 2 quick videos on how to run effective meetings, have them watch that video. So now you're hitting them with the abstract conceptualization and reading, the book report, which contains a little bit of the active experimentation and reflective observation. Then you're hitting them with watching a video. And then at the end of the month, have them talk about what they learned from the video as well. And then month 3, so in December, bring in a local consultant or find some consultant over the internet who can train your team in an active training session around meetings. So now over the course of 3 months, they're reading a book, they're watching a couple of videos, they're doing a book report, they're listening to people's book reports, they're listening on a video report, and they're going through a skill session on meetings. They're going to be much, much better at running meetings than they've ever been. They're also going to be much better at showing up and attending and participating in meetings than they've ever been. And then you can move to another skill in first quarter. So it's almost like you're going to take each of these 13 skills and put 1 skill in place per quarter. Resist the urge to do 12 skills in 12 months. It's too much. It's too fast. They won't kind of get into it enough. They're not going to be able to think about it. They're not going to be able to practice it. They're not going to be able to do it. I like doing 1 skill per quarter, and I do a book in the first month, a video in the second month, and a consultant in the third month. And consultants only have to be like $1,000, $2,000 to run a skill session, but you're really going to supercharge the group. If you want to go to more of an advanced model of training, and this is even prior to moving training into a program like a Thinkific or like a Trainual, the basic model of training that I follow is a pre-test is step 1. The reason you have a pre-test is people write a test, they fail the test. It could be like a 15 question multiple choice that they fail. And when they fail, they realize they should show up and actually pay attention in the actual learning that's coming. So the pre-test is set so that they absolutely will fail it. Then you're going to go take them through the content to learn everything that's on the pre-test, right? You're going to be giving them the content, using some video, using some reading, using some practicing or some role plays so that they learn the content. And if you're deploying that in a classroom session or over video, or you build that content after you've done it 1 or 2 times, you might build it into a platform like a Trainual or a Thinkific to then deploy it. And then after you've deployed the content, you have people write a post-test. It's the same test that they wrote as a pre-test, but now they're going to write the post-test after they've learned it all, and they're going to ace the test, which gives them to feel good. They realize they've learned, they've seen some of their progress. But now remember when we were back in high school, we were doing pre-calculus and we were figuring out all these little formulas. Well, we could learn it all, but we forget it a month later. The reason we forget it is we haven't had any retention on that content. So what I like to do is 4 weeks after running a training session, 4 weeks after running the post-test, I run a retention test, which is a slightly different test based on the same content to see if these people remember it, to see if it's sunk in, to see if they've retained it. And if they haven't, we go back to the content to reinforce it again so that they can write the post-test and can do the retention test 1 month later. After I know that they've retained it and it's sunk in, then I'm going to certify people in each of these skills. And I'll certify them at either a bronze, silver, or gold level. Bronze meaning they're proficient at it, right? They got it, they're okay at that level. Silver meaning they're pretty darn good at it, but they're not quite at the level that they could certify someone else. Gold meaning that they're really good at this skill, they're a role model at this skill, they could probably teach other people at this skill. The certification models that I use are, first off, is figuring out who certifies who or who gets certified. To get certified in a skill, you have to be rated a gold in that specific skill, or you have to be certified at a gold in coaching and at least a bronze in the skill that you're certifying someone in. The reason for that is if someone's a really, really good coach, they can certify people at skills that they're proficient in because they're really, really good at coaching and training. So coaching really becomes almost the preeminent skill that someone needs to be good at as a leader, because they can then certify people in all the other skills that they're proficient in. The reason that you want to get certified in skills, or you want your employees to get certified in skills, is you tie the skills to job promotions and pay raises. So the only way that a person can move from the level they're at to the next level is if they get a certain number of certifications. To become a VP or a C level, you needed to be certified in at least 10 of the 13 skills. To become a manager or a director, you had to get certified in at least 5 skills. And we wanted all staff to at least feel good that they'd been certified in 3. To move up to the VP level, you had to keep getting more and more skills. And then we really wanted the proficiency that you were even at a silver or a gold in those skills, so that you looked like, act like, and felt like a leader, because you actually could demonstrate the skills that we wanted other people to be proficient in. You're bringing somebody in from the outside of the C level, you would almost want to make that as part of their scorecard for the first year, is getting a number of these certifications happening. And usually when somebody comes in that is a true CEO or a CFO or a CMO, they usually have a lot of skills that they can become very proficient at these very quickly. They might be able to just look at the certification model itself and go, yep, I can demonstrate all this stuff, or, ooh, I don't know how to do this. Let's get trained in that part so we can become proficient. Then they hop over into Thinkific. They watch the training on running meetings. They can literally get certified and be proficient that day. And because everybody who's certified in the skill can certify those, you're not stuck with one learning person trying to certify 80 people. You could have a payroll clerk certifying, you could have a salesperson certifying. As long as you're proficient in those skills, it becomes like a virus inside of the organization where everybody gets it, everybody helps everybody get it, but we're helping them get skilled, not helping them get COVID. I don't really, as long as the person has gotten to that level of proficiency and they're certified in a skill. When somebody has hit that level of proficiency, they've pretty much got that level of proficiency for life, because they've gone through the content, they've gone through the post test, they've gone through the retention test, they've proven they can actually do it. It kind of starts to stick with them. And especially if the organization runs on those best practices, you're going to constantly be reinforcing it because you're using it and doing it and teaching it and talking about it all the time. The proficiency stays pretty high. There's going to be some written work that you might read. There's going to be some slides that I might take you through. There might be a couple of videos that I might work you through. There might be some 8 different scenarios that you have to try to figure out what the best leadership style is. We might have you then go out and role practice on using situational leadership. So the training, the modules is the course content, the speaker's notes, the handouts. You become proficient at pulling that together. I've been certified in conflict management, but I suck at it. So I think it goes through the unconscious incompetent, right? Like, I don't even know that I suck at it, to the conscious incompetence, like, oh, I know I suck at this, to the conscious competence, like, I know I'm good at it and I know how to do it, to then it's really stuck and it becomes part of me. And that's the unconscious competence. Like, I'm just doing it and I don't even realize I'm doing it all the time. So I've gotten good at it. And that's why situational leadership, I think, is taught every single quarter to the top 40 or 50 people at Starbucks. The top 50 people every quarter are relearning and refocusing and repracticing situational leadership. It's because they want to get them into that zone of the unconscious competence, that they're just using the skill because it becomes so habitual. And I think that's a really kind of insightful question, though, is like, how do we keep an eye on our leaders to know that they're role modeling and demonstrating the skills? And then that's part of our one-on-one coaching, is pointing out, hey, by the way, like, I know how to do this. Why aren't you doing it? I know you're not doing it. How do we get you doing it more? And that becomes our coaching time with them for sure. I'm a huge, huge fan of the one-on-one coaching model. And the one-on-one coaching model, I believe, is a balance of 3 things. It's skill development, so giving people the skills at the stuff that they're working on. And then it's support. So giving them the emotional support, cheering them on, making sure that they feel heard, making sure they have someone to brainstorm with. And then it's aligning them to make sure they're working on the right stuff. So around 15 years ago, I worked with a behavioral scientist who was an expert on situational leadership. And I showed him how I use the model. And he kind of looked at me, he's like, oh my God, I think you've just simplified 40 years of work in a half hour. So situational leadership was developed 60 years ago by Dr. Paul Hersey, who's a professor that was really focused on situational leadership. And then Ken Blanchard, who was a management guru who wrote the book 1 Minute Manager. The book, The 1 Minute Manager, was based on the concept and the science of situational leadership. It's still to this day what I believe is the best business book on leading and growing people. A very, very simple story and parable, but it's based in situational leadership. The core of situational leadership is that leaders need to stay flexible, right? We need to actually be able to adapt to the situation at hand. And the core of what we have to stay flexible on is assessing the balance of two different areas. So the two areas that you're assessing, the first, and the reason I've done it this way is the traditional model was really confusing. Like it wasn't easy to assess the style or where the person was in the development model. So the first area that I'm assessing a person in is their skill level. So what's their relative skill level on that project? So what I want you to do is think about the first project and how would you rate their skill on that specific project? Do they have no skill, some skill, or high skill? And give them 0 points for no skill, 1 point for some skill, 2 points for high skill. The second area that you're going to rate each of these people or the projects on is what's their commitment level on working on this project and getting this project done. Now, commitments can change based on them being overwhelmed. They could be nervous. They could have too much on their plate. Maybe on a normal day, if this is all they had to do, they might be all in. But if they've got 17 things on their plate, they might not even have the commitment to work on this project at this time. So think about with what's going on right now. Do they have no commitment, some commitment, or high commitment? Like they're not into it, they're kind of into it, or they're really into doing it. And give them 0, 1, or 2 points on each of the projects for commitment. Maybe they're nervous because they're brand new at their job, so their commitment is a little lower, right? Or maybe they've been there for 6 years and they've done this 12 times and they're already all in, right? Maybe they went to school for this specific thing, so they love it. And then what I want you to do is add up the points. So for each of the projects, I want you to add up the points. So for project 1, they're either going to have a total of 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 points. For project 2, they'll have a total of 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. So total up for each individual project, what's the total point score for each of those projects? And that gives you the person's development level. It shows you where they are on the development cycle and the style of leadership that they need from you. So let's say, for as an example, that the person has a 1 in skill and a 0 in commitment. On this chart, they would show up as a D1. Right? If they have a 1 in commitment and a 1 in skill, they'd show up as a D2. If they have a total of 2 in commitment and 2 in skill, they show up as a D4. Right? So you just add up the points and that shows them their development areas to where they are with the model. And then our job is to match our style of leadership to their development style. So if somebody has a total of 0 points, train them, or we're going to give that project to somebody else. If we need to get stuff done quickly, we might have somebody else on the team that can take that project and can nail it really, really quickly. Maybe we can then train that person later, but you might have somebody that's got a total of 4 points on that project that might take it and run with it really, really quickly, right? So often we go back to that training and coaching of people, which sometimes is the wrong thing to do. If they're not into it and they don't have any skill at it, it might be better to give it to somebody else. So if somebody has a total of 1 point, this is when you're going to tell them exactly what to do. You're going to give them the step-by-step instructions. Do this, do exactly this. Here's the steps you're going to follow. And you don't even have to explain why we do it that way. They don't need to know why. They don't want to know why. They just need to know exactly what to do. Give me the step-by-step. So your style becomes very much kind of micromanaging, which is exactly what they need at that stage, right? Regardless of how senior the person is, if they have a development style of 1, they want to be micromanaged on that project, not as a whole, not on everything, but on that specific project, they want to be micromanaged. If somebody has a total of 2 points on the project, they want to be coached and sold. They want you to show them the plan, give them the step-by-step instructions, and explain why we do it that way. Explain this is the methodology and this is why we use that methodology. They're ready to understand some of the why, and they're ready to be sold on why to do it versus told on why to do it, right? Sell them, don't tell them is a really good tie-in with the S2 leadership style. If they have a total of 3 points, that's really when you want them to develop the plan. You want them to know that you're there to support them. You might cheer them on. You might participate and sit beside them as they develop the plan. They might feel very supported, but they're also feeling that their skill level going up because they're recognizing that they're getting to do it and show their proficiency. Again, this works for people that are 60 years old or 12 years old across the whole spectrum. It's all based on the situation at hand on a person-by-person basis. And then if they have a total of 4 points, that's when you delegate the project to them and you let them run with it. You don't have to praise them. And then if everything on the person's plate is S4, we can start raising their goals and raising the projects that they're working on because they're showing proficiency and confidence and competence, and we can put more and more on their plate or kind of raise their role in the organization.